Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster, and today we're going to be looking at Louis Vuitton Fall/Winter 2021 men's. This show is wild. There are so many moving parts and it's moving so quickly that it's really difficult to understand how you're supposed to even be processing it. So we're going to be using Virgil Abloh's show notes to help us move through the pieces and help us understand what we're looking at. Over the course of his time at Louis Vuitton, Virgil's show notes have gotten more and more elaborate. The first show that he did there was 18 pages long. This show is 76 pages long, and it is available to everyone through Virgil's Canary Yellow website. The title of the short film is Peculiar Contrast, Perfect Light. The title of this collection is the combined names of the 4 sections of the video, which are Ebonics, Snake Oil, The Black Box, and Mirror Mirror. The only reason I am here is because of the people who support the channel through Patreon. If you like this kind of content, if you want this kind of fashion journalism to be more of the norm, if you just want there to be more episodes of this, I ask that you please pause the video, click this link, it takes 80 seconds to sign up, and then you get to kick me a couple bucks a month and know that this content is brought to you by you. At its core, this show is addressing the idea of archetypes, and it ends in an art heist. Every season, Virgil gives a glossary of terms that is ever expanding, and every season he highlights the new ones while he keeps the old ones around there in just a little bit more of a faded font. He defines archetype as conventional society's textbook example of its understanding of a certain type of individual or object and the codes and values that shape that individual or object. A man-made invention, archetypes are expressions of the unconscious bias instilled in us by society during our upbringing. See neotype. And then neotype is defined as, quote, the biological term for a specimen that replaces an archetypal specimen which has ceased to exist, end quote. It's cool stuff. We're going to begin with the prelude, which is titled Ebonics. We see the American poet Saul Williams walking in a snowy landscape. Saul and the rest of the creative team were asked for their contributions to this project to be based on James Baldwin's essay titled Stranger in the Village. The relevance of the essay in this piece is best summarized by Virgil when he says in the show notes, quote, in Stranger in the Village, Baldwin draws a parallel between his experiences as an African-American visitor in the Swiss mountain village of Leukerbad in the 1950s, the only person of color, and his life as a black citizen of America. It deals with the experience of being recognized and gazed upon as different, illegible, even alien. Emblematic of this circumstance, Stranger in the Village also illuminates the experience of being black in Europe and being a black artist in the birthplace of European art. The whole thing is a really powerful essay. If you have not read that before, I strongly recommend it. It's down in the further reading section in the description. Saul Williams was commissioned by Louis Vuitton to write a poem responding to Baldwin's essay, and that's what he's reciting at the beginning of this video. Saul's poetry is dense and it's really, really good. He's been working for decades at this point, making some of the best poetry of his generation. For me personally, Saul Williams is my favorite living poet. To be honest with everyone though, I don't think I understand Williams's poem well enough to be able to relate it to this show in a succinct and coherent way. If anyone wants to check it out for themselves, Saul Williams posted it on his Instagram. I link that in the further reading section as well. If you want to look through the show again and tell me what you think in the comments, I'd love to hear about it. We then move into Act 1, which is titled Snake Oil. We have an enormous amount of stuff to cover here. Williams enters the space. We can now see that his coat has these unusual airplane buttons on them. This is likely a reference to Margiela accessories. Virgil is obsessed with Martin Margiela. Williams is also carrying a suitcase that is chained to his arm. This will become important later. This space is heavily inspired by the Barcelona Pavilion by Mies van der Rohe and Lily Reich. We also see some chairs that the two of them designed as well. The marble here is obviously pretty close to the Barcelona Pavilion, but we can really see those similarities in the support structures, which are upscaled and turned into mirrors. Those same support structures also ended up being earrings for the show as well. Virgil has used the actual pavilion itself for other projects, and you may also recognize this room that they are in from the Batman movies and from countless music videos. Technically filmed at different locations, but same concept. Let's move around here a little bit. We should take some time here to talk about Virgil's collaboration with one of the founders of the conceptual movement in art, Lawrence Weiner. Lawrence is most well known for his piece, which is titled Gloss White Lacquer Sprayed for 2 minutes at 40 pounds pressure directly on the floor. The art has no physicality to it. There's no idea of ownership with this art. It is only instructions, and you yourself own that piece if you know about it and you accept that it is indeed art. Most of Lawrence's work now takes the form of writing phrases in a specific graphically designed font in different locations around the world. Usually what he writes and the experience that you're supposed to be having while looking at it are kind of determinant on where it is and the context that the work finds itself in. Lawrence's famous quote about art is often cited. It says, quote, "Art is that tiny little thing that you do not want to fuck up someone's day on their way to work. It should fuck up their whole life." This collaboration specifically has a few different pieces that read, "Arriving at the same place at the same time, somewhere, somehow," and Virgil's established concept of tourist versus purist. And about that concept specifically, the show notes read, "Virgil Abloh brings his established idea of tourist versus purist to the forefront, his term for the outsider who aspires towards an esoteric domain of knowledge versus the insider who already occupies it. The collection detects their respective codes in order to defy and unite them." As Saul turns, we see the first cowboy boot reference with the plates on the back of his boots. These are based on some of the foundational inspiration imagery of the collection, black cowboys. And we're going to return to that in a bit. As Saul walks through the busy street, we get our first in-depth look at this collection. This brings us to some really big questions that Virgil posed in the show notes. What do you want to be when you grow up? And who wants to look normal? In the show notes, there's a great summary that attempts to answer part of these questions. Quote, "One of the earliest questions we're asked in life promises us the freedom to shape our own identity. What do you want to be when you grow up? As kids, those dreams are personified by the stereotypical characters popularly associated with specific professions and lifestyles: the artist, the architect, the salesman, the writer, the designer. Their familiar uniforms reflect our understanding of ambition, talent, and lifestyle. Fashion is a tool for shaping those identities. Dress the part. But subconsciously, our collective view of those characters is still connected to archaic attributes of race, gender, and sexuality." Virgil notably cast 59 black models for a 70-look show. As a kid, it's really difficult to see yourself becoming a certain role if everyone that you see that's in that role doesn't really look like you. And in this show, we see Virgil trying to upend some of our preconceived notions about who fits into what role. We see the businessman in look 5, we see the artist in look 62, we see the poet, Kai Isaiah Jamal, who is the first black trans model to walk for Louis Vuitton. We see the choreography itself is directed all by Boy Child. It's worth noting here that Kai Isaiah Jamal's pronouns are they, them, and a non-binary person walking for a menswear collection is yet another layer of upending conventions. Virgil also delves into some more complex ways to thwart our standards of convention. Pronunciation time.
Peignoir.
In look 46, the outerwear here is listed as a peignoir, which is usually a women's piece. It's kind of like a bathrobe. Typically it's sheer, typically it's floor length. And we can see just about every single standard of convention for that garment is being upended in this specific look. And we said earlier that black cowboys are a foundational piece of inspiration for this collection. We know that because Candace Williams, after the show actually came out, she posted a lot of those inspiration pictures on her Instagram. She worked as the dramaturge for this entire short film. And I gotta say, that does say something about the quality of this short film that they had a dedicated dramaturge for the thing. Cowboys in our heads are often these tall, leanly muscled white guys that are riding on horses, right? It turns out that at one point, 25% of all working cowboys were black. So there's some standards of convention that need to be changed and the exceptions need to be highlighted so we can see more diversity in that role. But there are some that are just fundamentally incorrect. On this one, I'm just gonna let the show notes speak for themselves. Quote, "If kente cloth, the fabric of Virgil Abloh's cultural heritage, is rendered in tartan, does that make kente any less Ghanaian and tartan any less Scottish? Provenance is reality, while ownership is myth. Man-made inventions now ripe for reinvention," end quote. Okay, wait, this one is crazy. So this coat is listed in the look appendix at the back of the show notes as the color onyx. But this coat is definitely brown. And I was like, nuh-uh, onyx is black. But in fact, onyx is just a type of semi-precious ornamental stone that can come in lots of different colors. The upending of tropes continues. And all of the marbled coats in this collection are just a continual reference to the Barcelona pavilion. Shall we move? Let's move. And speaking of the Barcelona pavilion, it's further reflected in this denim jacket, which is not actually made of denim at all. It is made of croc. Isn't that crazy? The symbolism there is so nuts. So we assume when we're looking at it that it is a just basic trucker jacket, when in fact it is made of an incredibly luxe material. We also see Virgil pitching pants as optional for men. We have classical kilts, we have long skirts, we have midi skirts, we have pleated skirts, we have partial kilt attachments. We are absolutely awash in skirts, folks. Even in the prop newspaper in Look 4, if we zoom in really close, we can see myth versus reality, the full story. The theme of inclusion has always been very specific for Virgil. It's not just a wide, empty platitude. He's always making a very specific point about inclusion. Okay, so let's dive back into the video itself. Saul transitions from his commissioned poem for Louis Vuitton to his most well-known poem called Coded Language, where he compels us in the name of, and then he lists out authors and artists and events, and among those, James Baldwin. Coded Language is a call to consume good art and ultimately to make good art. In the further reading section down in the description, I linked Saul Williams' full reading of Coded Language. It is incredible. It is one of the best readings of any poem I've ever heard. Act 1 of this short film is called Snake Oil, but I gotta be honest, I don't know why it's called snake oil. The phrase snake oil means something that claims to be able to cure anything, but in fact cures nothing. But I'm not really sure how that functions as a metaphor here. If you guys have any ideas about that, I'd love to hear it in the comment section. As Saul Williams approaches the marble structure, which the show notes tell us is a symbol for Paris, we move into Act 2, titled The Black Box. Saul enters and we see Paris as a place where things stand still. The suitcase seems to be the reason that Saul can just walk into this place and others can't. We've seen others outside trying to figure out a way in, and even one person who's inside, but he's trying to help other people get inside, but it's not working. Paris is in a standstill. Icons and elements of Black culture are everywhere, but nothing is moving. Saul exits Paris and sets the suitcase on the ground. We then see our friend who's been outside of Paris, passed out, stir and get up. He doesn't enter the way that Saul enters, though. He gets in through a crack in the wall. He's a dancer. He's trying his best to get things in Paris moving, but he can't quite get it to happen. We hear the poetry of Kai Isaiah Jamal start up. Kai is an especially good reader of their own work, but I'll give it a shot for one of the two stanzas in the poem. Quote, "You know when all the girls used to take things from runways and ballrooms? It's not stealing or robbing or looting. It's stepping into a fantasy that shouldn't be a utopia, but just a living right. I think as Black people and as trans people and as marginalized people, the world is here for our taking, for it takes so much from us." I know we're doing lots of quotes here, but we can connect this back to Stranger in the Village. Remember that Baldwin was writing about his own experience visiting the Swiss Alps in a small village where no one there had ever seen a person of color before. And he relates that back to his experience being a Black man in America and being a Black man in the birthplace of European art. Quote, "But there is a great difference between being the first white man to be seen by Africans and being the first Black man to be seen by whites. The white man takes his astonishment as tribute, for he arrives to conquer and to convert the natives, whose inferiority in relation to himself is not even to be questioned. Whereas I, without a thought of conquest, find myself among a people whose culture controls me, has even in a sense created me. People who have cost me more in anguish and rage than they will ever know, who yet do not even know of my existence." And then Baldwin goes on later to say, quote, "I know that no individual can be taken to task for what history is doing or has done. I say that the culture of these people controls me, but they can scarcely be held responsible for European culture. America comes out of Europe, but these people have never seen America, nor have most of them even seen more of Europe than the hamlet at the foot of their mountain. Yet they move with an authority which I shall never have, and they regard me, quite rightly, not only as a stranger in the village, but as a suspect latecomer, bearing no credentials to everything they have, however unconsciously inherited." Did you forget about the art heist? Because that is happening right now. The dancer picks up the suitcase and makes the pass off, and Paris is upended. Everything that everyone has is suddenly being passed between each other. There's a willingness of each person to pass and accept these bags from each other, and when taken in as a whole, it looks beautifully coordinated. This is now a culture of artists borrowing, taking inspiration, remixing, fixing, and it's called a heist, so yes, stealing. But Paris is better for it. I can already hear some people getting so angry and getting ready to fire off a hot take in the comments here. Look, I myself have criticized Virgil publicly in an Instagram post for copying. I have since deleted that post because I changed my mind. If you would like to see the thing that changed my mind, you can go down to the further reading section and read the article that is titled, "If You Thought Virgil Abloh Was Original, Then You Don't Get It." It was written by the editor-in-chief at High Snob. I'm not going to take this time for me to pontificate about the implications of this for the fashion industry at large, because I don't think that's what this video is for, but I would love to hear your thoughts about that in the comments. I would ask, though, that you then find someone else in the comments who disagrees with what you think and then ask them questions about their point of view. Engage in some good discussion. Let's keep moving. The suitcase here serves some kind of symbolic purpose, and I think it sort of functions within the piece, sort of like the suitcase in Pulp Fiction, where the suitcase contains some incredibly important central key thing, but we're not supposed to know what it is. All we know is that it just sort of activates things. The suitcase is likely one of the reasons why this act is called black box, because in software development, black box testing means that you add an input and you see what the output is without worrying about the inner functionings of the software itself. An example of this would be like SEO testing, where you just type something into Google, press enter, and then you see what results it actually shows you. You're not worried about the algorithm of Google or how exactly their search engine works. You're just adding something and then seeing what comes out. The suitcase then is the black box, where we don't fully understand why Paris has changed in this way, but we know that it has something to do with something we put into the black box and something that came out of it. And you remember earlier when we defined neotype at the beginning of the episode? So that's the transformation that is also happening here, and I think that may be another reason why this is called black box. Neotype, again, the definition is the biological term for a specimen that replaces an archetypal specimen which has ceased to exist. And in this glorious mess of inspiration and free use, we can see that there is a future that's coming out of it, but we don't yet know what that future is, but that we're optimistic about it. We're looking forward to it. Okay, so the third and final act is absolutely incredible. Titled Mirror, Mirror, it's meant to be a reflection of culture back at itself, demonstrating that this art heist is already taking place. Yassine Bey, who we more popularly know as Mos Def, takes to the stage and performs. It's another train. Hang on. Wow, that was really short. Okay, Mos Def takes to the stage and performs. Yassine begins with his own song titled Kasabe and transitions into Microwave Mayo by MF Doom. R.I.P. Doom. Here, like with the Saul Williams part, it's a mix, taking an old poem, mash it up with a new poem. Take your own song, mash it with the lyrics from another song, referencing others. Yassine takes his own verse on his own track from his album, The Ecstatic, and then he switches to his altered verses from his feature verse on DJ Honda's 4 album. And then he makes a reference to Outkast's Forever, Forever, Ever, Forever, Ever, which itself is likely a lyrical reference to the song Forever Came Today by the Jackson 5. Anyway, after the MF Doom verse, Yassine Bey ends on his closeout lyrics on his own Kasabe song from his own album. The beat, oh, the beat. Mos Def is rapping over what might be the single most sampled song in hip-hop history, UFO by ESG. This song has been sampled by Mobb Deep, by MF Doom, by Ellie Varner, by J. Cole, Biggie, Big Daddy Kane, and tons more. On Who Sampled, the song is listed as being officially sampled over 400 times. This art heist is already happening in hip-hop. There are constantly people who are referencing, lifting lines from other songs, lifting little intros into sentences, doing all these things that in fashion is met with an enormous amount of criticism. The Barcelona Pavilion, Onyx, Lawrence Weiner, Kente Cloth, MF Doom, remixes, homages, references, an art heist. It's the past catching up with the present and moving forward into the future. What does this conversation about theft do for artists in fashion? Does originality exist at all? That's it. Please go check out the further reading section where you can look at some more pieces by some of the incredible artists that were involved in the making of this short film, and a lot of further reading so that you can kind of enrich your experience and understanding of the show itself. And if you really like this stuff, you should go join the motherfucking Patreon. You get to join the private Discord server. You get a lot of exclusive content. I recently did an analysis of Philip Plein for April Fool's Day and had a lot of fun doing that. Tons of stuff on the Patreon. Most importantly, the private Discord server is just an absolute gem. It's the best fashion community I've ever been a part of. And it is, it's so good. I love you. I mean it. Talk to you later.